Seiko watches are like piñatas. We beat them up, we know that there's candy inside of it, but we don't know the ratio of Twix bars to Skittles. So to some people, the movements inside Seiko watches are a complete mystery, and I don't blame you, there's a crap ton of movements out there. So if you guys don't know, I did put out a SKX007, 009, 013 movement upgrade video a few years back, and the whole point of that mod was to upgrade the existing 7S26 movement to the upgraded 4R36 or NH36, because that movement allows the watch to be hand winding and hacking. As a result, you don't have to do that really annoying Seiko shuffle to get the movement to start up. But there are still some people who don't know the differences between the different calibers that Seiko offers in their lineup of watches. This is more common when I have clients who are looking to do a full custom build with me, and they want to know what different type of Seiko movements that they have to choose from. So in this video, I'll be going over the 3 main category or groups of Seiko movements that are most encountered within their lineup of watches. Before we start, I just want to mention that I won't be going over every single spec because 1, it's super boring to hear and none of you guys will really care about it, and 2, it doesn't affect the way that the watch interacts with you too much. Unless for some reason you're able to tell that a watch is lighter because it has 23 joules opposed to 24. I also won't be going over the different versions within the same family like the A, B, and C. You won't care if the third wheel lower bridge has a screw in it or not, and I quite frankly don't care either. So the first group of movements is arguably the oldest and most outdated caliber that Seiko has. It is the 7S family. And this category of movements is typically found in your entry level or beginner watches that Seiko has. The most commonly known, the SKX007, 009, 013 all use this movement. It's also found in the thousands of Seiko 5 models out there, such as the SNK809s, the SNKLs, the SNKKs. Seiko has way too many watches. The key features of this movement is that it is an automatic movement, meaning that there's a rotor on the back so that when your wrist moves around, there's an oscillating weight that rotates back and forth to essentially charge up your power reserve. The BPH is 21,600. Its average timekeeping is around plus 45 to negative 35 seconds per day. A 40-hour power reserve, roughly. Day and date function that's quick set so it can change rapidly. Does not have hand winding and does not have a hacking feature. So what does hacking and hand winding mean? Well, hacking means that when you unscrew your crown in the case for the Seiko SKX and go to set the time, the second hand is able to stop if it is hacking. The benefit of this is that you're able to match up your watch more accurately to atomic clock down to the second. As for hand winding, it's essentially what it sounds like. You're able to hand wound the movement. So by rotating the crown, you're able to give juice to the power reserve so that your watch doesn't die. The benefit of this is that, of course, you don't have to do that shuffle to get your movement to start or power up, and you can actively play a role in the power reserve of your watch, which a lot of people do like. And just to make this point clear, the 7S family does not have hacking or hand winding. The next group of movements is the 4R family, which can be seen as the upgraded version of the 7S26. It's found in watches like the new Seiko 5 SRPD series or 5KX, as well as your SRP Turtles and other Seiko watches that's a step above the beginner to entry level pieces. The key features is that it is also an automatic movement, so it has that oscillating rotor. The BPH is 21,600, an average of plus 45 to negative 35 seconds per day, a 40-hour power reserve roughly, and this group of calibers is hand winding and hacking. So essentially the same specs as the 7S family, except that it has the hacking and hand winding ability, which is why it's considered the upgraded version. Some additional notes is within this family, there are 2 main category movements that are most common, which is the 4R35 and the 4R36. The 35 is a date only movement and the 36 is a day and date movement. Another important information and question that I get asked a lot is that the 4R family of movements is equal or essentially the same as the NH series of movements. So the 4R35 is the same movement as the NH35. The 4R36 is the same movement as the NH36. The 4R and NH movements are just branded differently or named differently based on how Seiko distributes these movements. The 4R movements are called the 4R movements when these movements are used directly from Seiko to put into their own branded watches. The NH series of movements are called the NH movement when they are distributed out to other companies like microbrands. So the 4R family of movements is exactly the same as the NH series of movements. 4R35 equals NH35. 4R36 equals NH36. There are no differences. So the 4R or NH series of movements are better than the 7S because of that added hacking and hand winding ability, which was the whole point of the SKX movement upgrade that I made a few years ago. This is also the most common movement that is used in custom builds because it is a super robust, reliable movement. It can be regulated to achieve good accuracy, and most importantly, it is accessible. Now, the last group of movements within the series is the 6R family, which can be seen as the upgraded version of the 4R or NH series of movements. The most common watches that use this movement are the SRP series, the SRP013, as well as your Sumos. So basically a tier up from the watches that had the 4R 36 or 35 movements. Also used in the MM200, a very cool watch. Now the key features, again, it is an automatic movement, so it has the rotor with the oscillating weight. The BPH is 21,600. It has an average timekeeping of +25 to -15 seconds per day. 50-hour power reserve roughly, which is 10 more than the 4R family. And of course, it is hand winding and hacking. So again, the 6R series is the upgraded version of the 4R series. It has 10 more hours of power reserve roughly, and it also has a smaller range for the timing deviation. But something that you guys have to know is that these tolerances or range of accuracy don't really mean much. These are just tolerances that Seiko dictate for these movements to be within before they are sent out of the factories. All of the movements, the 7S, 4R, and 6R series of movements can be regulated to have better accuracy. So in theory, you could have a 7S movement that has an accuracy of +2 seconds per day, and you have a 6R movement which has +20 seconds per day. What's important to know is that because these different families have tighter tolerances for their accuracy, the chances of you getting a 6R movement that has better accuracy than a 7S movement is a lot higher, assuming that none of these movements are regulated and are coming from the factory. The most common movement in the 6R family is the 6R15, and this is a date-only movement. So if you're trying to have a build that requires both the day and date, the 6R15 isn't really the best option. Now technically you can make the 6R15 movement to have the date function, but it would require modifying or changing out a part within the movement so that it can accept the new complication. But this process involves complete disassembly of the movement, altering a part, resurfacing, and putting it all together. So officially, this is a date movement. If you're looking for a day and date, just use the 4R series or NH series of movements. Now just with the 4R series and the NH series, the 6R series is the same as the NE series of movements. So the 6R15, exactly the same as the NE15. 6R15 are called the 6R series because they are coming out from watches that Seiko are selling themselves. The NE15 movements are branded as such because these are being distributed outside of Seiko to be used in other company like micro brands again. So the 6R or NE series of movements is the slightly upgraded version of the 4R or NH series of movements because it has 10 more hours of power reserve, it has a tighter tolerance for the accuracy, and it has a slightly different material composition, which is why it has 10 more hours of power reserve. And I won't bore you with the details of how this works, but just know that it has some materials that aren't the same material. That doesn't make sense. So that's it, the 3 series of movements: the 7S family, the 4R family, also known as the NH series of movements, the 6R family, which is also known as the NE series of movements. 7S being the super basic, non-hacking, non-hand winding, the 4R being the upgraded with its hacking and hand winding, the 6R being even a further upgrade with hacking, hand winding, slightly longer power reserve, and slightly better accuracy, straight from the factory. Gotta know that. All 3 movements can be used for Seiko mods, but if you're gonna use a 7S movement, I highly encourage you to just go with the 4R route. And if you're using a build that only requires the date, the 6R15 is the best option to use in that build. Otherwise, use the 4R or NH movements for both the day and date. Now I know there are a bunch of other movements that I didn't talk about, like the 8L series that's found in the MM300s, but I didn't talk about it because these movements aren't really accessible to us. If you want to learn more about these movements, there's tons of resources online that you can look through to find more information about a specific caliber. There are other movements that I didn't talk about, like the 7S36, the 6R35, and NH38, NH37, NH70, NH39. Did I say that already? There's a shit ton of Seiko movements out there, and you don't really have to know every single one of them. Generally, if you know the 7S26, the 4R36, 435, NH35, NH36, 6R15, NU15, you're basically covered. So that's it. This is a very long and boring video. I'm sorry if I didn't really entertain you guys much, but I wanted to get this information outside so that the people that don't know about it can hopefully know the differences now. And I do offer custom watch modification services, so if you're looking to modify or upgrade your existing watch or want to have a full custom build made from scratch, please do shoot me an email. It'll be on the screen and in the description box below. I had to find a way to plug that. So that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, follow me on Instagram at loom_shot to see more awesome Seiko mods, and I will see you guys in the next video.